You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NCFNB takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now mansplaining the server on how they used to do it. It's Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today we have a woman in studio who has been making your food look better for almost a decade now. This is the founder and CEO of Food Scene, Felicia Trujillo.
Thanks for having me.
Hello,
good morning.
Do you know this person?
It's a coincidence we have the same last name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very rare last name.
Especially in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, baby. How you doing?
Nervous.
For those that don't know and can't figure it out, my wife is on the podcast. Yes, I went full Borat just now. As we've discussed, we've been doing the show getting close to 8 years, and Felicia's been on the podcast as a co-host. And like, you've been around, you've been on it, but I don't think we've ever said, hey, let's do a food scene episode. And why not? Like,
I invited myself this time.
Is that how it happened?
I said
It was in the trade, I think, for the office. You gave up your big, spacious corner office to the pod.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was blackmail.
There you go. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not immune to that.
Yeah, that's a good trade. Yeah, because now if you're watching the show, if you're on our YouTube station and you're watching it, you can see that we have this big spacious spot. Matt's got a nice window behind him with a mural behind him. And Felicia has this great logo on the wall of the NCFNB. And I got a guitar over here, so that's cool. And a plant that's fake, but it looks like it's real.
You could have had wallpaper, palm tree wallpaper behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to the palm tree wallpaper?
That was the first thing to go.
It was a food scene.
Yeah,
I moved into another office, same space, just other office.
Yeah.
The other side of the wall.
All right. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Food Scene. I said it's over a decade since you've created this company, right?
Yeah, when you said that, it made me feel kind of old.
Okay.
But yeah.
Or what about established?
Yeah, I like that. I like that better. So I started Food Scene quite quickly after moving to Raleigh. I did not move to Raleigh with the intention of creating a marketing agency. It kind of organically happened. I had been a professional photographer in LA for 10 years. And prior to that, I had gotten my master's in business. And I loved my marketing classes and I loved the creativity around marketing, but I was honestly really intimidated by the marketing culture in LA at the time. And even just reading the job, I just honestly didn't have a lot of confidence at the time. And every job description was like, you're going to give your life and soul to this agency and you're going to work around the clock and work on weekends and you're going to live and breathe this. And I didn't want that.
Yeah. And you were also doing the wedding photography gamut.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if you know this, actually. Max, I don't know if you know this. Is my high school job when I was 14 and 15. I was the wedding photographer's assistant for years. So I know how that goes. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was fun for me then because you got to go and drink a lot of Shirley Temples. But I know for you it was a grind, giving up your weekends, and then you spend all the time editing those pictures, and you're carrying all the equipment, etc.
It was, yeah. I mean, there was elements about it that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the photography. I enjoyed my relationships with my clients, but I kind of fell into it, and I felt like there was more. I needed to do more and I didn't know what it was. And I spent 10 years doing the weddings, doing the events, and randomly some, wine projects would come up, but I really never thought beyond that. And by the time we had moved to Raleigh, I knew that I did not want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
We also had 2 little kids and being gone on the weekends was not sustainable, but I didn't know what exactly it was that I wanted to do.
Well, I knew that I had just started at a restaurant. I was at Midtown Grill, and Scott James was cooking up all this amazing stuff. And this is going to make all of us sound really old right now, but Instagram was brand new at that moment. This is 2013 when we first moved here, and I think Instagram started in 2012. So it was kind of obscure at the time. It was like everybody was just doing all of their filters that looked like old Polaroids and all that. And it was like, ooh, this is neat. But the idea of taking pictures of food and putting it online was new, which was weird to think because it's so saturated now and it hasn't been that long. But I remember Felicia, who is a fantastic photographer and had just moved, like I had moved 3 months earlier to like get it established and all that. And she was finishing up and she came with the kids later. I'm like, hey, would you bring your camera to the restaurant and just take pictures of some of this cool food? We have a new menu we're releasing. And she did. And then I was like, hey, there's this social media thing. And she knew all about it. She knew what Instagram was. I'm like, maybe we could put those pictures on Instagram. And you're like, yeah. And then, I mean, you ran with it from that point on. But you're like, there's a whole way to do this. And then that's the thing with Felicia is like, once she wants to learn something, she'll take it to the nth level and like study and research everything about it. So before long, she was now like in charge, like she knew social media from that point on, and it's been pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, the timing was perfect because I had this experience with photography. I had studied marketing, and I was new to Raleigh and didn't know anybody. So I was living on social media to learn my community and learn who people were. And it all just came together. And the owners of that restaurant at the time hired me. They're like, well, have her come in and do more pictures because it was a seasonal menu and there was just constant changes. And I started posting on social media and I started updating their website and doing a little bit of everything. And I realized like, there's something to this. And it didn't take me very much time to recognize like, okay, I need to come up with a name. I need to come up with a contract. I need to create somewhat of a business plan because I also knew Raleigh was so young and emerging and restaurants were popping up and it just made sense. Like I could do this for Midtown Grill, for this restaurant that Max was running, and I could do this for other restaurants. And it was in a matter of months that other restaurants started calling Midtown and they're like, who's doing that?
Yeah.
Can that person do that for us? And that's how Food Scene started. I mean, I filed my LLC like that April of 2014.
Yeah,
and
that's crazy.
Yeah.
What is I know that a lot of people shoot food, right? Mm-hmm. And you're a photographer, you're trained, mm-hmm. You've been doing it for a long time, but like, what are some of the takeaways, the keys? Like, I mean, mm-hmm. It seems simple, right? Like you take a piece, but it's not. It
correct. I mean, first and foremost, and this is the cornerstone of all photography is lighting, right? You just need light, whatever the light is, whether it's window light or studio light, you have to find some light to illuminate what it is that you're working with. Yeah. Or not illuminate. I mean, it can be dark and moody, but you still need that light to create the contrast. You also need your food to look good, right? Because we've all seen food pictures where we're like, ew, a pile of gravy. So obviously your food needs to look good. I think for me, obviously I have honed craft and expertise. I've always been artistic and I have an eye for things, but I also love food and have an understanding of food. And I think that shows in the imagery because it's not just like, oh, it's food on plate. Like I understand like how it's plated, even if it's at a fast casual place or a nice place, I understand why it's plated a certain way and why the ingredients is being used that way and where it goes on a plate and what needs to round out the story, right? To entice people to eat it or go to that place and have that experience.
Yeah. You're looking at it from like the end users for
totally.
Like, yeah. Did you ever, I wonder in the beginning, in the early days, like you're just starting out, you're kind of growing in your confidence and like becoming this quote unquote CEO. Do you ever have to tell a chef, like, can you plate that a different way? Or can you add like some color to that dish? Because now you have the whole production, right? You have like food stylists and stuff. But back then.
Right. You know, it depended on the situation, right? Like sometimes I'd say, oh, let's add a little bit of greenery, especially with things that are like brown, right? Yeah. And I think this brown or orange needs some help, or you just lean into it being brown, right? But But I would always do it too in a respectful way. And usually it was like, hey, what do you think if we do this to it, rather than shitting all over somebody's vision, right?
Yeah, you're like, redo that.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Have you ever heard of a tomato, maybe?
Well, but social media now it's not Instagram where it was brand new and everyone didn't know, and it was like there was an edge there. But now everyone has a phone and everyone knows a filter, and most people can take a picture of food and make it look good. So social media has except for Matt and me too. This is not always the case. So how do you find yourself relevant in the social media realm, in this age, because everyone thinks they can do it themselves? And what makes, why does somebody need food scene in this realm today?
Well, I think not everybody thinks they can do it themselves. Some people think that they can, and maybe they can, but they don't have the time.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, we work with, I talked about us starting restaurants, but over the years, we've worked in food service, we've worked with food manufacturing, consumer packaged goods, beverage brands, tableware brands. So it's not just food. And across all of these businesses, everybody has a vision or everybody has an idea, but they don't always have the time or the bandwidth to execute it and execute it consistently.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll just say we just don't know how to do this. So that's where we come in, and we come in as a partner. We don't come in as we're going to, take this over or insert our own agenda. I mean, it's always a partnership, and it's like, what are the problems we can solve? What are your goals, and how can we facilitate that? And there's always a through line, right? Like whether it's photography or whether it's a social media post or a public relations initiative, doesn't stop at that. It's always like, what is the end goal? Like, who are we talking to? How are we solving our problem? How are we getting butts in seats or getting, online orders through e-commerce, stuff like that?
Yeah, because your company has obviously evolved. We've mentioned that you initially kind of started as a photographer. I bought her first camera, no big deal, Canon AE1 back in the day. It was my graduation gift to her from Pepperdine. But you were a photographer and then kind of social media manager. But now you're doing other stuff like you did all this catalog work with all these big companies and international business with beverage and CPG packaging and all, but then you've also delved into PR, which does kind of make sense. I think, why did you jump into PR? Why are you doing that now?
It's always been very important to me with Food Scene that we only offered services that we could execute really well or complemented what we were doing. And in the early days, we were we could do websites, and we decided no, website designers should do websites. And we partnered with people who did excellent websites, and that was our area of expertise. We also don't want to white label a bunch of stuff and farm it out. And then there's disconnecting communication or quality deliverables. So when we decided PR makes sense, public relations makes sense, it's because it complements social media, because social media is an element of public relations. Sure. But it's also rooted in my relationships and my connections with people. And going back to weddings, like I said, my favorite part about weddings was the creativity, seeing the final images and the relationships, not weddings. And I love connecting people. I love solving problems. And PR is a great way to do that, right? It's the opportunity to tell somebody's story, but also to say, hey, your business and your business should collaborate. And we were already doing that. Yeah. We just had never said, oh, let's put a label on it, or let's define it a little bit more and kind of hone in on that.
What do you do because I think I struggle with this. I think a lot of companies struggle with this. How do you define KPIs, ROI, success in marketing and PR for your clients?
It's the intentional long sigh. I mean, that is the perennial problem in a lot of ways, because a lot of things are not measurable, right? You can have KPIs with e-commerce, but there's caveat to that, because if your e-commerce is through Amazon, you can't always track the data. You can't always see, oh, this click turned into a sale, unless you have the Shopify, or it's embedded in your website, right?
Just so, because some people don't know what we're talking about, KPIs, key performance indicators. Just how do you qualify the work you do?
Yeah, right.
All right, just say that.
And so like on social media, sometimes it's like, oh, we gained followers, or we sold a widget through, the shop on Instagram or TikTok. With PR, it can be media hits, right? So there's some elements where you can track, like, okay, here's what we did and here's what we got. But then there's elements that you can't quantify, right? Like, you don't necessarily know how many people heard about something or saw it or passively saw it on social media or in a catalog or in a magazine unless they come to you and say, oh, I saw this here and now I'm patronizing your business.
Yeah.
So it's
oftentimes people, the average consumer, don't even know, or they've been hit it with a couple of different ways, and that's why it finally stuck in their head.
Yeah. I mean, and that it really is like pushing a boulder up a hill sometimes. And fortunately, we're so lucky because over the years, we've really worked with a lot of really great companies, a lot of really great brands, a lot of really great people who understand that. And they're like, we get it. It's the whole picture and it's the sum of the parts. Every once in a while, there's some that sneak through that are just like, people who just are hard numbers, people have a really hard time with marketing because there is so much that can be ambiguous. Like, everyone knows, I know I need marketing, but I can't necessarily quantify every element of it on paper.
Yeah.
Well, let's make some practical applications here for you right now. Let's pretend Matt is opening up a new restaurant, right? And he's got a new, what kind of food are you making, Matt?
Mediterranean.
Oh, Mediterranean. Okay. All right. So Matt's going to open up this Mediterranean place. Wine bar? Do you have wine there?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
All Mediterranean wines, though.
Okay, cool. All right.
This is where it happens. This is where in 5 years or 10 years, you're going to be like, well, that one day on the podcast.
I'm not opening up a restaurant. Nope.
So, but if Matt did, and let's just say it was at the foot of where the CVS is here at the corner of Hargett and Fayetteville Street.
Oh, good location.
It's a good location. Yeah, good job, Matt. I helped find that for you. Finder's fee, 10%. And Matt's going to open in 3 months. What's the conversation? Let's say he hires Food Scene and says, I need to figure this out in a PR sense, in an opening, and a strategy to get myself out there. What are the things that you discuss? Like, take us behind the scenes a little bit.
Well, I get with restaurants specifically, money is tough, right? Like, oftentimes restaurants have a small budget when they're opening or when they're doing business, unless they have investors. So there's so many ways you can go about it, right? Like, you can do it yourself, and a lot of business owners do, or you can hire somebody to either consult or implement components of it, or you can have them do the whole thing, right? You definitely have to set up your social media. Like, that's the cornerstone, because that's how you're going to connect with your people, the people, and you're going to tell them about your business and what kind of food you have and what your vibe is and what they can expect when they come in. And I always say, look at your social media as like your baby website, because most people are going to social media well before the website.
Right.
And oftentimes younger generations aren't even going to a website.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. It's like websites aren't even they're not even as common in practice anymore.
You have to have them.
Yeah, you have to
for
put it
SEO,
somewhere.
like search engine optimization, like, it all feeds each other, right? Like, if somebody's going to search, where do I get Mediterranean food? You have to have the website.
Right.
You have to have the social media, having press, right? Like having a magazine or, local paper or TV, podcast, right? So the more you get yourself out there, the more likely it is you're going to create this word of mouth or buzz. Like, the old fashioned word of mouth is social media. It's internet. It's online right now. So set up your social media, whether you have somebody set it up for you or you do it yourself, and make sure all, your address is correct and your hours of operation are correct. Show behind the scenes, you can say, oh, we're building this concept, or, this is how we make this, and show obviously your food, because that's what people are coming in for. Now, as far as PR, we're in a small town. I think in any town, people love to hear about new restaurants. So that's easy to pitch, and you can either do it yourself or you can have somebody do it. And it just depends on, do you have the relationships to email somebody or call someone and say, hey, I'm opening this restaurant and here's the information. Maybe you don't, or it's intimidating. You don't know what you want them to say about you, because that's part of the nuance, right? You want somebody to sell you, and you may not necessarily be good at selling yourself.
Right.
And obviously imagery. You need the imagery of your space and your food for your website, for the social media, for any sort of media. Again, it's all stuff you can do yourself, but when you're in the throes of opening a business and you're, working 16, 17, 18 hours a day, maybe you don't have time.
Yeah.
Or you do it and then it gets deprioritized because there's other things to do and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And it's critical,
Some people take the philosophy of, I'm just going to keep putting out content and do that, versus finding the right cadence of what your level of or your followers want to see.
I mean, we will say it over and over again, quality over quantity. Because if you're posting too much too, you get spam, like it's spammy, first of all. And think about it this way. When you follow accounts on any platform, but we'll use Instagram, for example, I mean, you're probably following 2,000 accounts, but how many do you see in your feed? You're not seeing a lot. And so if you're a business, you want people to click like, you want people to comment, because that means you're going to show up on their feed. And if you're just putting out content that no one cares about, you're going to fall out of their feed. But if you're like, here's a new special, here's something that we know our audience really wants to know about, and you put that out and people are like, yes, I love this. I'm so glad I'm going to come in. And they go to that restaurant, like social media, your phone knows everything. And that helps drive that. Even if you're posting once a week and it's the best quality you can put out there, then that's better than doing like twice a day and it's just putting stuff up.
Yeah. Switching gears for a second, unless Max, you wanted to go down that road more of the
hypothetical. No, we can
Matt's
get back into it. Yeah, maybe you do like falafel Fridays or something.
Oh, yeah,
that'd be a good one.
Tahini Tuesdays.
There it is.
I mean, the thing is, to that point, if like Tahini Tuesdays is super popular and you talk about it, like you want to put out there what your diners want, like you're giving them something. Like we had a social media account years ago and the seating in this particular space was very uncomfortable and they had swapped out, put new seating. It was like the best performing post they'd ever had because everyone's like, oh my God, I love your place, but now I love it even more. And it was like, because they recognized that business did something, they heard their customers.
Yeah.
And you can do a lot of social listening through social media too and understand what you're like, look at your stats and see what's performing, what do people like,
For a restaurant, that's a particularly tough line to walk though. Like, especially take it back to menu design. It was I was just reading Will Guidera's book, Unreasonable Hospitality, and he talks about basically like you want to cook the food that you want to cook, but you don't, I'm paraphrasing, but you don't want to be too, like, put yourself too much in a box where you can't listen to your guests. But also, if you listen to your guests too much and just cook what they want to cook, you're pandering.
I mean, that's a huge rub, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to find that balance.
Yeah. So I think it also goes to the social media game. Moving away from that for a second, I want to talk about, like, corporate culture. I mean, you're a corporation, of course, but you're a small business owner. But you've, I think, and this is across the board for any business that you're in, you've maintained some employees for a very long time now. Talk to that and talk to how do you create the culture and how you've maintained these employees and brought them up.
I'm so lucky. I have such a great team. I think part of it is me because I am a really good people picker. I have good intuition.
She married me, folks.
Yeah.
Say less.
I also, I mean, I am very lucky, but I also recognize pretty quickly in people like, this person is a self-starter. This person takes initiative. This person asks good questions. They're curious. Now, I mean, we've had some that haven't been a great fit for our team. And I'll say we've learned way more from those than we've learned from the great ones.
I did social media for her for 48 hours and I was fired immediately. No, but to that point, you have also, you hire people that help where you may have weak spots or to like build up your whole thing. You don't need a bunch of Felicias. You get people that complement your talents and then also have strengths where, but that's also a product of why you've had a good hiring process and longevity is that your employees don't feel like, well, shit, Felicia could do it better than I can or whatever. It's like, no, like they know their lane and that they know that they have responsibilities that are genuinely theirs and like they own it.
Well, I will tell you with the employees that I have now, and it feels weird to call them employees because that seems so impersonal, but I hired them because of who they were and the potential I saw in them, not because they were skilled at any particular thing. Obviously, they had a baseline, like some sort of capability, but I was like, that can be trained. And I thought, and I had heard that in other books and, podcasts and stuff. And I thought that was a common thing, but I'm actually surprised by how many people are like, oh, I never thought about doing that, hiring somebody for their potential and the type of person they are, meaning they're professional or they're curious or those things, because you can teach some elements of social media. There is a nuance, right? And there's understanding what's in the zeitgeist and creativity. And some of that can be taught, some of that's innate, but they also all feed off each other and like each other. It's really important for me to treat people well. So it's like they have benefits, they have a flexible schedule. If it's like, hey, I'm going to do a yoga class at 11, fine. If your work's done and you're on our client calls, like I don't care. The only time it becomes a problem is if work is not getting done.
Yeah.
But right now that's not a problem with the team that I have. So I think it's a matter of knowing what you're looking for, knowing what you're not looking for, treating your people well, not micromanaging, letting them be creative. Sometimes they come to me with ideas and they're like, we have an idea. And I'm like, I love it. And they're like, we thought you'd hate it. I'm like, no, go with it. And it makes them feel great, right? And anytime they feel like I'm kind of burnt out on doing this, like, how can I do something different? We talk about it as a team and we switch roles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Why is the social media realm, and even for that matter, the PR realm, dominated by females?
Yeah, I think women are very community based. Like, we have our group of girlfriends and we like to be social, and we, get on platforms to talk about our kids or on social media to connect with our friends and family. And I think women like to be connected and also are innately creative and like to share. I guess that's the answer. I don't
Guys,
really know.
more we're like in our silos and our.
I think so.
Our
Yeah.
pubs and
Like in our own, when we do the analytics of our own audience, our listening audience, like our RSS feed, like our podcast listening audience, skews heavy towards men, but our social media platforms skew way heavy towards females.
Yeah.
But it's so like maybe more women are in the social media like scope in general. Like that's
women are definitely more in the social media scope. I mean, with most of our social media accounts, we see it's mostly women, and then there's these odd anomalies. But yeah, I mean, it's our team of all women is not intentional. It's just always happened that way because there tend to be more women in marketing, tend to be more women in social media.
Staying on the social media plan, and this is, I don't know, I think Max and I are aligned on this, but like when we've worked with certain social media people before, I'm in the position where like, I want them to take ownership and I want them to tell us what to do, because I'm hiring them because I don't know what to do in social media. I don't know what to post.
Right.
I don't know. So, and then I feel like there's probably some clients that are more the other way. Like, I want you to do this. How does that work, and how would you deal with the situation?
Right.
Or what's Food Scene's philosophy on that?
I mean, we love to collaborate with our clients. We don't want them to say, here, run with it, because that's a recipe for disaster, because inevitably they're going to be like, well, I didn't really like that. So we always keep the lines of communication open.
Sure.
Like, we have an onboarding process and a due diligence process. We're like, what do you want to see? What do you want us to do? How can we do this best for you? And we have standing monthly calls. We always do a check-in, like, how was our onboarding process? How was your social media going? Were there posts you liked, posts you didn't like? And having standing calls gives us the opportunity to do that. Are there things that need to be changed? So we like direction, but we've had so many clients for so long that they're like, you guys got this, run with it.
Sure.
And that's great because it gives us creative freedom. But I mean, we're always open to feedback and collaboration. Like, we have no ego in this. This is not our business. We're amplifying somebody else's business, right? We'll always make recommendations, or if somebody is emphatic about something, we'll always hear them out. And if we disagree with it, we'll say, here's why we have concerns about this. Let's talk about it. And if you're still on board with it, we'll do it. But it's always about communication. It's constant, open, honest communication.
So Max was talking about like Instagram was the starter, and to kind of bring you into this realm. Social media is always changing. Media is always changing. What do you see in the future of social media? I mean, I know like TikTok is on the up and comings, but that's I think
and the inclusion of AI and like
and the inclusion of AI, and then also the huge change in Twitter now being X.
You have to find the platform that suits your business, right? X does not suit every business, right? If you're a small little restaurant in Raleigh, you don't need to be on X. With TikTok is like every platform is so particular. And so TikTok is very particular, and people who are digesting content on TikTok are particular, and they don't want to be sold to. They don't want to be marketed to. They want like the face of the company or the brand to be on screen, not here's our marketing team.
Yeah.
Right. So
I thought though, from stuff I've been reading, that TikTok is super effective in sales though.
It is for content creators, right? So as a marketing team, we can create content, but we're also like, we can't have our faces on all of our clients' TikTok. And it's like, wait a minute, you're on this client,
I've seen that girl and everything.
So you can't do that. You have to either have brand ambassadors, influencers, or somebody who's a representative of the brand, right? So if it's a restaurant, it's your chef or your bartender. If it's burger patties, like maybe you have somebody you align with that's like your brand ambassador or whatever. So TikTok is so much more complex and nuanced. And you also have to think about the time, talent, and creativity that goes into content. You don't just put up a TikTok, or you don't put up a reel. Like one single reel can take us 8 to 10 hours to shoot, because we're buying the product for the shoot, and we're preparing the food, or we're pouring the drink out, or we're creating like a little tiny movie, and we're putting copy, we're writing copy, or we're creating sounds and non-copyright sounds. Like it's not like you slap it up. And so to go to your question too, like how much is the client involved? And we want our agency and our marketing to take ownership over the brand. That ownership and that creativity is very time consuming, and you can have that, but you have to pay for that time, right?
Yeah.
So if you're like, just put stuff up, it's fine. You know, my budget's $500 a month. You're going to get $500 worth of content, because that's only so many hours.
I struggle with that as being on the client side of that, and seeing it was like, well, what are your hours? You're billing me hours, but I don't see your work on the hours. Like we don't see that. So
there's a lot of behind the scenes. Like we track every single hour that we do for every single client. And we have some social media accounts that hover around 60 to 75 hours a month.
Wow.
And that is client calls. That's looking on social media and like finding trends. That's creating the content. That's writing copy. That's creating graphics. That's engagement on the platforms. Like there's so much behind the scenes, but all you see is that's a cool post.
Right.
Yeah. Took no time at all, you know?
But what about like chefs, or just, we'll call it chefs because we're talking about food and beverage industry, and they're like the celebrities and all. How much do you encourage them to just do it on their own? And like, should a chef every day be putting up a post about something that they're doing? Let's see, like I saw Kevin Ruiz last night, Mr. Handsome, he's listening. You know, he's got a face for the camera and he knows what he's doing. So like, should Kevin be putting up, you know, like here I'm in the kitchen every day and like, this is what I bought and all that? Like, how does like a person kind of like lead their mission?
Right. They have to want to do it.
Yeah.
They have to have a plan before they do it.
Yeah.
And they have to do it consistently.
Yeah, that's the rub.
Because your audience has to know, okay, every Monday, Kevin is doing a new recipe, and I really love how he presents it. But he has to think, what am I going to do? What ingredients do I need? Is the audience going to be able to prepare this at home? You know, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So you can't do those things on the fly and be successful, because you have to have that consistency.
Yeah.
But what I've known too is like, because, you know, we obviously have a social media channel, and like we're always trying to figure out ways to break through, you know, and if you do the same thing over and over, it tends to like fall on deaf ears. Like you can't just keep putting.
Yeah.
We have a weekly show, and even though the show is always different with different guests, the format, if you will, is the same. And so it's like, well, it's almost like the algorithm, whatever that is.
It is the
gets
algorithm.
stale. Like it doesn't like stale. It likes new and
It
likes
is a
change.
moving target. And that's why it's like, oh, why hire an agency or do it myself? Are you keeping on top of all the trends and all the nuances? Like Instagram just changed their feed from squares to vertical panels, right? Not on everybody's feed, but it's starting to change over. So every piece of content that you've created over the years, you're like, it's a square, so my grid looks great, is now fucked. And these are little things like when you're just like, I'm doing my podcast, I'm doing my restaurant, I'm doing my business. Are you also on social media every day identifying trends or reading articles about social media? Like Instagram's not doing this anymore. Now TikTok has implemented this. And now you can do e-commerce here. Like and every day it's switching. And the algorithm favors this today, but they're not going to favor it tomorw.
Yeah. Apple's going to charge you extra money when
Apple's
you promote.
Apple's going to charge you for boosting posts,
You
right?
see
And
that
now you're being
shit?
held captive. So it is a perpetual, constant.
What's your resource for the information?
My team. I mean, they are literally reading and digesting information all day, every day. Like when they are not doing active work for our clients, that in between hour, they're reading articles, they're combing social media, and they're on it. They're like, oh, this is trending. This like Demure versus Brat Summer. Like this has to go up today, right?
Matt's so brat right now.
Yeah, but you can't do that a week from now or a month from now because you're like, oh my God, that's so lame. And TikTok has a different timing cadence than Instagram. TikTok is always first. Instagram is second, follows like a few weeks behind. And these are things.
Are you saying like in the trend?
Yeah.
Like the trend is being set with TikTok.
Always. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's all these little nuances.
What about
right?
Snapchat?
Snapchat is, it's a whole different thing, right? But and another platform is Pinterest. Pinterest is largely ignored, but it is a massive platform. We use it for most of our clients.
To that same point, I also feel like LinkedIn is slept on.
Well, okay. If you're a restaurant, like you're, Matt's Mediterranean,
Yeah.
do you need to be on LinkedIn? Is it going to bring people to your restaurant? Maybe, right?
Yeah.
But if you have limited bandwidth and time, where do you want to be? You're probably going to be on Instagram.
Sure.
We have some clients that are only on LinkedIn because they're business to business.
Yeah.
Or we'll split it and do, here's, industry information or whatever it is, but then we'll do kind of more on Instagram, more behind the scenes, like company culture, and make it a little bit softer so that somebody who might like to work for that company, they're probably looking on Instagram to kind of like, what is this about? Where LinkedIn is a little bit more business focused.
Right. What was the thing about Apple? We glanced over that. What is Apple doing now?
So if you have a post on Instagram and you want to boost it because one person saw it and you're like, I want 20 people to see it, so I'm going to put $10 behind it. If you do it on your Apple phone, Apple charges an insane percentage. I forget what it is. Insane percentage. So now you have to go to your desktop
To boost a post.
into your Instagram post and then boost it.
Yeah,
Through
if you
Instagram.
do it on like Google Chrome on a computer,
you don't
get the extra
It can be on your
charge.
Apple computer.
Yeah,
It just
if you do it
can't
on your
be-
iPhone.
Yes.
Which is such bullshit.
You can go on your iPhone through like Safari or Chrome and log into your Instagram. You can't do it through the Instagram app. You can, but you're going to pay fees for it.
That seems so counterintuitive. Like, why would they?
It's a cash grab.
Yeah, but that seems like a silly cash grab because you're going to drive people off your
But
usage.
people are going, I guess I have to do this now. They're not saying, what's the workaround, right? When you have limited time, you're already overwhelmed doing your social media. And you're like, I just,
pay those.
Apple's looking at it like, we provide you this convenience, motherfuckers. We made the phone and provided the structure for apps. So they're like, oh, well, we can just get you for more money. What else you gonna do?
I say bad move by Apple.
All right, switching gears completely, because before we get out of here, I do want to discuss, you also have shot some pretty awesome cookbooks, and you have 3 under your belt, I believe it is.
Yep.
It's a fun aspect to talk about because a lot of chefs I know are like, I'd love to have a cookbook. I'd love to be able to do this and that. For one, well, you worked with Jamie DeMent, who was our 7th guest on our podcast. Now we're almost at 500 episodes, so this is going way back. And at the time, she had the Piedmont restaurant, and TV's John May was over there and all that. This is going way
I
back.
saw him. He said to say hi to you.
Oh, nice. Good man. But then she also has Bella Bean, which we still order our delicious eggs from. Like, we've been Bella Bean loyalists for years.
Wow.
She did The Farmhouse Chef. I see that book all the time in places. And then, of course, Matt Register. You did Southern Smoke, which was a fantastic barbecue book. And then you recently did
VA Cookbook.
Yeah, the VAG cookbook, which is like a spin of Italian, a lot of Italian. So for one, like, what does that mean in your setup? And two, how you've been around it, like watching these folks get their cookbooks like off the ground. What does that whole process even look like?
Well, I can't speak into detail as far as like behind the scenes for the cookbooks because there's so many ways to actually do it. You could self-publish. You can get a publisher. There's a lot of nuances. Like if you self-publish, you just do a cookbook. But if you want to go through a publisher, you have to have an Instagram following. You have to have a reputation, right? Because you want a publisher to say like, okay, you're marketable, you're sellable. Cookbooks typically are not like money-making endeavors. They're more like passion projects, not just for me, but for the chef or whoever's creating it, right? But you then have this printed, this book that like you pass down to your family and whatever the premises of the book, if it's your, stories, your heritage or whatever, it's like not a photo album. I can't think of the right word.
It's a document. It's
legacy.
Exactly. It's a legacy. And I feel that same way shooting cookbooks, right? Like I get to tell somebody's story. People don't just write cookbooks because they want to write a cookbook. Like usually there's a story to go with it or a memory or cultural impact or whatever. And for me to visually capture that is a special experience and a work, you're working with the team. You have to have a team because you have to have somebody preparing the food. You have to have somebody styling the food. You have to have somebody shooting the food. Publishers sometimes want, a certain vertical and a certain horizontal. And, there's a lot of nuance. You can't do it yourself.
Menu testers that like.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go deep into it, you could have recipe testers and recipe builders for months before you even get to the book part, right? But it's such an amazing process. And I've loved, like, that is a passion project for me. And all three of the books, like I have such wonderful memories, working through them. And then for me to see my images, I mean, so much is digital now and I still have these books and they're in my house and they're in my office. And I'm like,
touch them.
I created a cookbook. Like these are my images with my team. And I collaborated with these really great people and it's warms my heart, really. It's awesome.
Where is your goal for Food Scene now? You've done the cookbooks.
Oh my gosh, that's a huge question.
Yeah, I mean, but like to recount, you started with social media. Started photography, then into social media. You've gotten into the marketing aspect, the back end things, even the web, the SEO, and all that stuff, and then social media, PR. Like, where do you go now? I love
where Food Scene is in terms of what we offer, like the photography, the social media, the public relations, those all complement each other really nicely. And also just the general marketing that goes along with that. I love the relationships that we've established over the years in food and beverage. And it is so broad and vast, like, because we have relationships with various food service companies and food distributors and equipment distributors, but also the restaurants. We're like, you two should know each other and chefs. And I love all of that. And I love my team. My primary goal is to continue to build upon that, right? To have more projects and meet new people and connect more people together and help businesses scale themselves, because I like the entrepreneurial journey. I love the business story. And I think that also is a huge benefit to our clients, because it's not only that we can do marketing, we understand their journey in business, whether it's a sole proprietor or a huge corporation. I mean, we've worked with Suntory and we've worked with Pepsi brands, but at the end of the day, there's still that one person who's our point of contact that we develop these relationships with. And they have roles to fill and messaging to get out. And I want to continue doing that on, whatever scale we can take it to, really.
That's actually like something we didn't touch upon, but something I found to be so interesting is that you've done a lot of international business. And like from what I've seen, you've taken, like with Suntory Brands, a Japanese company that goes to the States. You've been like that liaison that helps kind of articulate their message to Americans, because the messaging can be very different. Just maybe walk us through a little bit of that.
We are great translators, our team. And again, this goes back to the studying, right? So, and it it can be for our international clients that are marketing to American consumers, but it can also be with some of our clients that are very tech heavy. So like agricultural technology, like you have these big science terms, or manufacturing, food and manufacturing, equipment manufacturing. These people, they know the language, and then they try and communicate to their customers or sales reps or consumers or investors, and they're using words that nobody understands, right? And so we translate into layman's terms. So for an Italian product or a Japanese product, we can say, okay, we understand, we don't want to diminish the culture. That's part of your product. But how do we communicate to the American consumer that will receive it where it makes sense for them, right? Because there is cultural nuance and language. And we have a lot of fun with that. And we also have a lot of fun working with brands abroad because it's so interesting, and you get to meet other people and and learn about other cultures. Yeah. Like Max and I went to Italy with our family early this summer, and we got to meet with some of my clients in Modena, and it was just a delight and a joy, and connected us. And we weren't just like this company that does marketing for them in the US. Like now we have a relationship and we have this element of trust. Yeah. And that's awesome. And then we have people we know in Italy. We can go back and visit.
And that was cool too, because it's like a family. There's sisters, and then the parents, sister's marrying this guy, and he's working, and they're all like this. You'd have been impressed about this like mushroom farm that they had was extensive, like crazy. And they were so excited to just walk us through the whole thing. And then at the end, they're like, now we have lunch. And then we went to an amazing place.
You know, they feed you.
Yeah.
They tell you not to drink cappuccinos past 10 a.m.
No milk past 10 a.m.
No milk products. Yep.
But yeah, I mean, and again, like all of this goes back to the relationships, right? Like, and the ownership. Like for us, this isn't like, we're talking about somebody else's business or somebody else's product. For us, no matter how big or small, we take that ownership, because that love and care that we put into it, that translates. And it's that, and it creates value. It's not just a dollar amount, because a lot of times businesses, again, talking about the numbers, people, they're like, well, what are the KPIs and what are these numbers? But it's like the value is so much more than that. It's our capabilities of translating. It's us listening to you and communicating with you. It's the relationships that I've crafted over the years. Like that's, I think, unique to our team and what we provide, as a service.
Yeah. By the way, that just reminded me of talking about your Italy trip. Is you were a guest on here before. It wasn't talking about food scene, but it was when you two went to France with your family for a month,
and we talked about 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's 6 years ago. I knew that you had been on as a guest before, not just ancillary.
So every 6 years, I get to be
every 6 years.
NCFNB.
This has been great.
Yeah.
I hope this was mostly helpful. Like I hope I provided some helpful information for your audience, because marketing can be overwhelming. Right?
I think it is, and like you said, like the stuff to be able to quantify is the most maddening thing, and so all the other stuff, the relationships and understanding the inner workings, I think is helpful, especially for a lot of small business owners there.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil sometimes too. There's some things you should do, things you shouldn't do, and it helps guide the whole style of your business. If like you have a good team on you that can like kind of show you like the right direction to sail in.
Yeah, and with most of our clients, we end up staying with them for years, but we also can pass off, right? We can train teams, because ideally everyone should be doing their own content and social media. You're telling your story, but that's not always practical. So we can, we can also help and teach you and, put you in a position where your team can do that.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, for all of you out there, go check out Food Scene, and you will learn where you can eat and drink extremely merrily.
Thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. By rating us online, you're helping others to discover our show. Follow us on all platforms at NCFB Pod.